Jurors down here into the courtroom.
All right, Agent Garner, we had stopped off here 12:22 p.m. just after noon in the murder time frame of 12:21 to 12:24, correct?
Correct, sir.
All right, do we have some sort of phone activity at 12:22:40?
Yes, we have a data session at 12:22:40 that accessed the tower 29098, sector 23762, azimuth 180, means that antenna was facing south. That duration of that data session lasted 6 seconds.
Okay, and
That tower right there could provide coverage for the homicide scene.
okay, so this tower right here,
Yes, sir.
south, and like we said before, this is not a boundary, this is for illustrative purposes.
Yes, sir. Correct.
Homicide scene is the red dot here, is that right?
That's correct.
I mean, if they can see my cursor, but the homicide scene, yellow line. So McCabe is here. And the tower is north of the homicide scene.
Yes, sir.
We're in the neighborhood of Orange Mound. And this is 12:22:40. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
What is this blue shaded area up here?
That is the mapping of a previous cell tower that was accessed, that was north of the homicide scene.
Oh, okay, I got you. So we've already looked at that. We've already looked at that one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we come down here for 12:22. To the homicide scene.
Yes, sir. And this is the data session that was mapped at 12:22:40. The 12:23:05, that was an incoming voice call from 901-315-9866. That call was not answered and it was sent to voicemail. and that accessed Tower 164.286, Sector 131, azimuth of 90, which is facing east. And then
I think we went back, I'm sorry, I think we went backwards a second, okay. So now we are less than a minute from that last phone call, is that right?
yes,
And I see orange mound.
this is the tower that's north of the homicide scene.
North of the homicide.
Yes, sir. Airways and Lamar, just north of.
So would it be fair to say the phone has moved at this point? Or yes or no?
That phone just accessed that tower. I don't know where it would be.
Is this tower close to the other tower?
Yes, sir. That was the previous slide where you saw the little slice of shaded blue north of. That's that tower.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So let's go back to that slide. I thought you had said this was a previous call, but is this a?
That is a
subsequent
previous call,
Okay.
but then the device connects to that tower again.
So 1222, the one that could cover the homicide scene.
Yes, sir.
1223, we're back up on this tower that is north of
Yes, sir.
Could this tower also cover the homicide scene?
I wouldn't know that unless I was able to do like a drive test on it to see the coverage that tower could
So would it be
extend out.
would it be impossible to say yes or no to that?
Without testing it being possible. Yes, sir.
Now, I do also see, because the pins are so hard to see from far away, this is Bradley Street, an address on that Bradley Street, is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right, if we could skip forward.
And if we'll back up that slide there, that call that the device accessed the tower just north of, where you can actually see the shaded corner, that device then reconnected to the tower just south of it. When that unanswered call was sent to voicemail, it accessed that tower, 29098, sector 23762, azimuth is facing south. So you have an incoming call that accessed the tower north of it. That call is not answered, and it's sent to voicemail. And that transaction connected to the tower just south of it. That's what we're seeing right there.
And the tower just south of it, is it this tower?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this is the same tower we saw at 1222 that covers the homicide scene?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So to get this right, there's activity at 1222 at a tower that there's activity at 1223, which is a call and voicemail,
Yes, sir.
which accesses two different towers.
Yes, sir.
One is this tower north of, I'm doing better now. One is this tower slightly north of the homicide scene
Yes, sir.
that may or may not cover the homicide scene.
Correct.
And then when voicemail picks up or whatever, same call, different activity, it accesses the tower south of it.
Correct. Accesses a separate tower. Yes,
Which
sir.
is that same tower that services the homicide scene.
Yes, sir.
Does that necessarily mean that the phone was moving, Tom? One,
It could be indicative of movement. It could be that tower that services the homicide scene is just north of the interstate. And if there was a lot of traffic, that tower could get full and it would shift off it would say it's a busy, full, no more traffic. So it would pass off its communications to another tower.
okay. Would it be fair to say then that these towers are close enough to each other that it couldn't mean the phone is moving, or it may not mean that the phone is moving?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
And this is the This is the transaction is listed in the records of the incoming call and being sent to voicemail that I mapped out. And had 26 different calls between 12:58:33 and 1:57:50 that access this tower in South Memphis. It's going to be tower 157889. Two sectors, 3 and 13. That's going to denote the antennas. You have more than one facing the north-northwest, that azimuth of 345. And that cell tower provides coverage for the Gospel Gardens apartments.
So now we're about 30 minutes or more, a little bit more after the homicide, and the phone's in an entirely separate area of Memphis,
Yes, sir.
entirely separate tower,
Correct.
vastly different coverage,
Yes, sir.
vastly different towers, but we are the tower that would service the Gospel Garden apartments.
Yes, sir. And that is just all 26 calls from the records that I mapped out.
From 30 minutes after the homicide to over the course of the next hour.
Almost an hour exactly, yes, sir. And then there were 44 calls that I mapped out from 2:22:45 p.m. until 5:23:18 p.m. And these access towers, 156814 and 156815, two different antennas, antenna 5 and 15, with an azimuth of 240 degrees and antenna 133 with an azimuth of 300. So that device was hitting that tower with those different antennas 44 different times between those, actually it's a 3-hour time period. So
the phone has left the coverage area for the tower that covers the Gospel Garden apartments,
yes,
which is South Memphis.
yes.
It has traveled
This is the
substantially east, is that
Yes, sir.
correct? And I'm looking at the map, there's Hickory Hill, is that what we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the Hickory Hill area of Memphis. And that is 222 to 523?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Those are the 44 transactions that I mapped out for that 3-hour time period. It was very difficult to see. It was very difficult to put into a presentation. What we're seeing is 13 calls that I mapped out. Kind of shows the device moving in a north from the Hickory Hill area towards the Baptist East location of Walnut Grove and Interstate 240. And those calls, last tower hit at 5:48 on that northernmost tower at the very top of that picture. And those transactions show that device moving northbound. And the 5:48, that was the last data from that device I could map from the CDRs. We go from Hickory Hill on the bottom and just head north. And those were the 13 transactions that I mapped out.
All right, that was the Justin Johnson phone. 513 is a Cornelia Smith phone?
Yes, sir. The 513-6236. And there was no data to map between 11 and 12. It has for 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., but from 11 to 12, there was nothing for me to map. There was no transactions there. And then from 12 to 1, You had 5 different calls that I have listed here that access towers, I guess around the Lamar. Starting at the top, that incoming was called from number 213-7867. They came in at 12:01:26. That call access tower 158-661, sector 13, azimuth 290, facing west-northwest. That call lasted 1 minute 12 seconds. Then a second incoming call from 901-236-1625 at 12:02:55. That accessed tower 158-661, sector 13, azimuth 290, facing west-northwest as well. That call lasted 9 seconds. You have a third call, incoming call from 901-236-1625.
All right, well, wait a second. I got distracted because something caught my attention. This last call we talked, these last 2 calls we talked about at 12:02 and 12:04.
Yes, sir.
All right. It's an incoming call from 236-1625.
Yes, sir.
Well, we know a number that is.
That is Justin Johnson's cell phone number.
Okay, so we're looking at Cornelius Smith's call detail records,
Yes, sir.
and at 12:02 and at 12:04, he receives phone calls from Justin Johnson's phone.
Correct, sir. Okay. Then the fourth transaction, incoming call from 901-273-4691 at 12:11 that accessed tower 156958, sector 12, azimuth 270, which is facing west. There was no duration recorded for that call. And then at 12:51, the last call that I mapped was an incoming voice call from 901-273-4691 at access tower 161877, sector 13, azimuth 340, which is facing northwest. And there was no duration for that call either.
So it looks like with regard to Mr. Smith's phone, you're going to be able to map some stuff at 12:01, 12:02, 12:04,
Yes, sir.
12:11. But then not any time between 12:11 and 12:51,
Correct.
okay, which would be the time the homicide would fall in there.
Yes, sir. These were the towers that were accessed, and you can't really see the date and time that they were accessed. They were on the that tower 158161, bottom tower. 3 calls there, and the times 12:01, 12:02, and 12:04. And then the other 2 towers, the calls.
Is that, there's no pen that I can see now. That would provide coverage for the Lamar and Sims area, wouldn't it?
Correct, yes, sir. And then the 12:11 call access tower there at the top right. And then the 12:51 call access the tower there in the dead center.
The 12, the one I'm on right now is 12:11, is that right?
12:11:52, yes, sir.
12:11. It would provide coverage for the Orange Mound area of Memphis, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I see there's a pin, this is Bradley, is that right?
That's correct.
And then, so this one's 12:11-ish, is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
And then I'll move over here to this tower on the left, but that's 12:51, so
That's
we've got a
12:51.
good 40 minutes has passed.
Yes, sir.
And now I'm again in the Orange Mound area, and here's Bradley Street.
Yes, sir.
Homicide scene is this red dot.
That is the pin I dropped to the homicide scene, yes, sir.
Tell us what that phone does after 12:51.
The next hour I looked at from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. One 273-4691 at 1 o'clock, and that access tower 65664, sector 11, azimuth of 90, which is facing east. And there was no duration for that call. Then there was a second transaction, was an incoming voice call from 901-900-3143 at 1:14:54. That access tower 65664, sector 1, azimuth of 90, was facing east as well. No duration recorded for that call. And then the third transaction from 901-900-3143 at 1:41:21. That access tower 65664, sector 1, azimuth 90. There's no duration for that call as well.
What does that mean when we see calls with no duration?
It would be, if you place a call and you hang up before the other party answers, or there's going to be no duration there. If there was an abnormal completion on the call, there'd be a system glitch or kind of hiccup, there would be a no duration there.
Okay. But it still shows an event on the phone?
In
A
the
no
records.
duration call still
Yes,
shows
sir.
an event as far as records go?
Yes, sir.
And you're still able to use, if it provides location, you're still able to use that location?
Yes. So looking at the records, the calls that came in, there were only 2 calls. They were incoming and not answered, and then they went to voicemail. But you have to look at the records and the definitions page to determine that. And what I have circled here are the service codes. And luckily, we asked for what these service codes mean, and they give us a definitions list. So I can look at their definition of what a service code means. And the 02A, as defined by T-Mobile, tells us that a call that came in, it was not answered, but then it was forwarded to one of T-Mobile's voicemail service numbers, voicemail service, 1-360-842-9999. And those 2 calls that show as 4, they access tower, the same tower 65664, sector 1, with an azimuth of 90. The voicemail that was left was 5 seconds, and the second voicemail was 3 seconds. And we can get that from the raw data that we see right there. And then that is a mapping of that tower, the 65664, sector 1, azimuth 90, facing east. That's the tower that we mapped out.
This is 1 o'clock. 1:14, 1:41, 1:42, 1:46, 1:47.
Yes, sir.
And we are a tower that services Orange Mount. And this is Bradley Street, that's the pin.
Yes, sir.
Could that tower provide coverage for Bradley Street?
That tower could provide coverage for Bradley Street, yes.
Okay.
So there were 17 calls between
And
2 p.m.
Yeah, let me back up.
Yes.
For the slides we just saw, is everything incoming?
between
One,
between 1 and 2, everything was incoming. There was no outgoing No outgoing phone calls, no.
Everything's incoming. Does everything go to voicemail?
Nothing was answered, and everything was sent to voicemail.
Okay, so everything's incoming, everything's not being answered, goes to voicemail. Tower that covers Bradley Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That'd be consistent with the phone having been left behind? No one to tend to it?
Could be. If the calls are not being answered, yes, sir. So between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., there were 17 calls that came in. This is going to get a little, wouldn't say messy, but the first and second, they weren't 2 calls. That was 1 call. It was an incoming call that was not answered and went to voicemail. Then the 4th call and the 5th call was another call that came in unanswered, was sent to voicemail. The software can show that as 2 different transactions, 2 different calls, but looking at the raw records will tell you that's not 2 different transactions, not answered, and it was sent to T-Mobile's voicemail number. And looking at the service codes, again, the 028 tells us the service codes, they're circled. T-Mobile's voicemail numbers. So you had a series of incoming and outgoing calls of those 17 between 2 and 3 p.m.
Okay, so what is the first outgoing call from?
First outgoing call was at 2:36. I'm sorry, 2:39:33. We got to back up 1 slide.
That stuff that you were explaining. I see outgoing on this list. I think you were just explaining that that's not a true outgoing call.
That is not a device making an outgoing call.
I got you.
That is a call that's come in, not answered, then it's routed to the voicemail.
Okay. So when's the first true outgoing call?
First true outgoing call at 2:39:33 to 273-4691.
Okay. So the first true outgoing call, 2:39, is what you said?
2:39.
You said that.
And these were the towers that were accessed by those incoming calls. You had 7 calls on that top tower.
Gotcha. Everything incoming.
Yes, sir.
Tower that could cover Bradley, Orange Mound. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And then the device starts accessing 2 different towers, the tower shown at the bottom.
Once we have that outgoing call at 2:39, then
There's-
2:40 and 2:56. A bunch of different times.
Yes, sir.
2:43, 2:47, 2:48, 2:50, 2:52, 2:30, 2:55. We start accessing different towers
Different towers. Yes, sir.
South of where we were.
And those towers provide coverage for the area of Lamar and Sims. And then between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m., there were 25 different calls, both incoming and outgoing. Between 3 and 3:20, device access tower 158661, sector 13 with an azimuth of 290 that was facing west. There were 13 calls, 3 incoming and 10 outgoing. Again, item number 6 and 7 is an incoming call. The number was busy this time and it went to voicemail. And we're told that by service code 29. And then after, between 3:20 and 4 p.m., the device is going to move around the city. So we're going to see a bunch of different towers being accessed after 3:20 p.m. So this tower right there at Lamar and Sims, there were 16 transactions reported. That was between 3 and 3:20. They all accessed that one tower between 3 and 3:20. So the red dot is the pin that I dropped locating the homicide scene. The tower just to the right of it was a tower that device was accessing for that first 20 minutes between 3 and 3:20.
That's Lamar and Sims.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then it moves over and accesses the tower to the right at 15:26. And then just above that at 3:29 p.m. And then that north tower on the top of the sheet at 3:37.
So phone's just sort of, it's Lamar and Sims for a while because we've had multiple calls there.
Yes, sir.
And then it's on.
Yes, sir.
And it's these towers are all close to each other. I'm looking here. This is one area of downtown Memphis. Our time ranges are
This is between 3:44 and 3:55 p.m.
okay. So accessing towers in downtown Memphis.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You can proceed.
And then this is still different towers in downtown.
Okay.
3:58 p.m. and both of them 3:58 p.m. The calls were bouncing off accessing tower to the right and then accessing the tower to the left. And then there were only 2 calls between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. One outgoing voice call from 901-864-2309 at 4:18. That call access tower 161877. Sector 1 azimuth 70, which is facing east-northeast. And then the second incoming voice call 901-318-7238 at 4:59. That access tower 154315, sector 14 azimuth 56, which is facing east-northeast. And that's what I have mapped on the next slide. Those are the 2 towers that were accessed at 4:18 and 4:59 p.m. The tower
Tower north of Bradley.
north of Bradley at
Orange
4:59, and the tower providing coverage for Bradley at 4:18. So, based on the mapping information that
Okay, we're about to switch back to the first phone. We're going to get a summary. Is that
yes,
right?
sir, we're going to summarize.
I'm making a motion actually. Call back to Joe.
Yes, sir. 901-236-1625. And this is all information that I mapped out from T-Mobile. Device, it was accessing the tower. They're providing coverage for the crosstown concourse from midnight to 2:35 a.m.
All right, so consistent with the area of crosstown up till 2:35 a.m.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then the device accessed a tower that could provide coverage for the Valero gas station at 3:18 a.m.
Entirely different area, Memphis.
at 4:49 that morning a.m.
Okay.
The device was accessing a tower that provided coverage for the crosstown concourse from 9 accessing towers that provided coverage for the area of Lamar and Sims from 12:02 to 12:10 p.m.
Different area of Memphis than Crosstown.
Yes, sir.
It's about 11:06.
Uh,
Well, by 12:02, it's in the area, the coverage area, including Lamar and Sims.
Yes, sir.
And is that also the time frame in which we see the phone calls from this phone to Cornelius Smith?
Yes.
Okay.
Next slide. Right. The device was accessing towers that provide coverage for the area of 2370 Boulevard during the time of the shooting between 12:22 and 12:23.
Towers that cover homicide scene, time of the homicide.
Yes, sir. Then the device went to the area of Shelby Drive and Two-Lane Road from 1 p.m. to 1:59, which was the Gospel Gardens area.
Entirely different area of Memphis.
Yes, sir.
Tower provides coverage to the Gospel Garden, used to be called the Two-Lane Apartments.
Yes, sir. Then the device went to the area of Hickory Hill Drive and Valleydale Drive from 2:22 p.m. to 5:26 p.m. It was in the Hickory Hill area.
Leaves the area of the Gospel Garden.
Yes, sir. And then the device went to the area of Walnut Grove and Humphreys Boulevard from 5:42 p.m. to the 5:48 p.m. There were no records to map after that.
So you didn't get any more records with location information that you could map after 5:48.
Correct.
Okay.
Summarize the phone number for 513-6236, and this is also based on the information that I got from T-Mobile. The device was accessing towers that provided coverage for the area of Lamar and Sims and 1168 Bradley between 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. And the device continually accessed a tower that provided coverage for 1168 Bradley from 12:28 p.m. to 2:38 p.m.
Is during that time period that everything's incoming?
Yes, sir. And going to voicemail. And then the device accessed towers that provided coverage for the area of Lamar and Sims until 3:19 p.m.
Do you know where Pressure World Car Wash is?
No, sir, I do not. The device traveled around the city to the downtown area between 3:20 p.m. and 4 p.m. And then the device returned to the area of 1168 Bradley between 4:16 and 4:28. There were no records to map after 4:59 p.m.
Thank you, Agent. No further questions.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Evans?
You could time for a break, Judge.
I think it will be. Ladies and gentlemen, you've only heard part of this testimony, so it's probably a good time for lunch. So let's just take a lunch break. Let's break until 2 o'clock.
Court stands in recess to 2 o'clock.
That's correct.
Right.
It's not.
Lot of different factors that can affect the reliability of the information. Fair? And I think you've hit on some of those. But, and you've said this, you're in no way, shape, or form here today to try to say where a cell phone was at a particular point in time.
Not at all, sir.
Right? Now, you said essentially you can talk about kind of a general area, right? Or
Yes, sir.
based on the towers. Now, first thing, kind of helpful to talk about what area means, right? A general area. I know you've said at certain points in your testimony that, especially your summary, that the cell phones at times were in places where they were in the area of, concourse across town,
Yes, sir.
and towers that service that area.
Yes, sir.
Right. But fair to say, there's a lot of towers, and I think you spoke about this at the beginning of your testimony, related to T-Mobile.
Yes, sir.
What, 500 and something towers was it in the greater Memphis area?
563 within 10 miles of Memphis.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so quite a few towers, and the reason that there are so many towers is because cell phone companies want to keep their customers happy, right?
Yes, sir.
And so the idea of these call detail records and their inclusion of cell phone data location information, right? Like the latitude, longitude. Cell phone companies don't do that because they're trying to figure out where they're, where people are to a certainty, correct?
Oh, not at all.
They're doing it because they want to figure out how, customer satisfaction, right?
Yes, sir.
They want to be able to tell when calls are being dropped, make sure they have another tower that can pick up a call so people aren't getting calls dropped.
Best service possible. Yes, sir.
Right. So that's their point,
Yes, sir.
not to find folks.
Not at all.
Okay. Now, typical tower, would you agree with me that a tower coverage area could cover as much ground as 2 miles,
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yes, sir.
right? And even in a populated area like Memphis, it could go out that far, depending on circumstances of other towers in the area, correct?
Yes, sir.
So when you talk about areas, in the area of airways, Nikita Cookie, that could potentially go out miles in either direction, a couple of miles in either direction, correct?
Down south towards the airport. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And you talk about down south towards the airport. I was going to get here in a minute, but in fact, you talked about some calls that occurred about 12:23, and there were several calls and or data usage points at 12:23, and you walked us through. I think it was starting on page 44 of your report. Can I use the elbow? Is it on? And you remember what I'm talking about now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Can you explain again how many either data usage or calls go on at 12:23? Is it 2 or 3?
There's at 12:22. There's a data section. One data section. sir.
Okay. All right. And then
It's
after that?
At 12:23, there is an incoming call that's unanswered and is sent to voicemail. Well, it's routed to voicemail, not sent.
Okay. And is that the call that goes over 2 towers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And hits 2 separate towers. And isn't there another data usage in that minute, that 12:23 minute? And I'll refer you to your report page 45 of your report, it says the data that was mapped. And specifically, it references the second entry, data entry there down, references tower 65681, 122308, and the tower being at 2160 East Range Road.
Yes, sir.
Now, you didn't map that particular data entry, right?
No, sir.
And you're pretty familiar with the Memphis area, right?
Yes, sir.
And where Range Road would be. You would agree with me that that would be down towards the Memphis airport.
It's right there at Range and Airways. I know where the tower is. Yes, sir.
So I'm going to hand you a document. And this is, I want you to give that a look. Does that look like the mapping of Cellhawk?
Does that have a page number?
This is, I'm about to ask him if he can recognize it. It's going to be an exhibit.
It could be, yes, sir. I recognize the icons used for the pins that are dropped on it. Yes, sir, from South Hall.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so, Judge, I'd ask that this be marked the next numbered exhibit.
There's no objection, Your Honor. He's showing it to us.
Thank you. Okay, so this is a particular page out of that page. No, it's not. It's
No.
not in there.
Not
Okay,
in there.
good. I see, good. This is a map of different locations in Memphis. And I'm just gonna, it's got the Memphis airport kind of in the middle of the page. FedEx World Hub next to it. 240 is the gray intersection going through the middle of the page. And it's got 4 pink areas that the witness has been speaking of as areas of, from cell towers, I think is what you marked it. We'll mark this as exhibit 65.
Thank you, Ron. Do you still have a copy of that in front of you?
I do not know.
I'm going to hand you back what's been marked as Exhibit 65. I've got a copy myself. And I'd like you to look at that as basically in reference to the 1223 calls. And I think you would probably agree with me that these calls up here are ones that you've already displayed in your report,
Yes, sir.
correct?
That's correct.
And one over here,
Yes,
is
sir.
that one that you recall the same point in time displaying in your report?
I don't know. I would have to look at the tower number and look back at my report. It could
Okay.
be.
And you can feel free to refer to, if you want to look back at your report
Yes, sir.
to see if that matches. And if you recall, I think you testified at 12:17, there was a voice call to Tower 164286 to the tower north of Makita Cookie and the scene of the homicide.
Yes, sir.
So there's a data usage at 1222 to tower 29098 to north of Makita Cookie, which would be this one here, correct?
Yes, sir.
29098.
That's correct.
And then you've got a 122305 voice call to north of Makita Cookie at 162486 that you noted.
Yes, sir.
Right, and then you've got another hit on the same tower at 122306, 29098, which is the one north of Makita Cookie,
Yes, sir.
right? Now, You've also got this one, and I don't think this one got mapped, for 122306. It's a voice call to tower 21198, which is in this area of I-240, west of Makita.
I do not have that one mapped, no, sir.
Okay. And so, and you don't have any dispute that these are basing on the same call detail records that you would have had in relation to this phone number, purporting to be Mr. Johnson's phone, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then down here, the call detail records show at 122309, tower 6581, which is down here next to the airport.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, based on what you know of this area, would it surprise you, or would you know that it's about 3 miles from Makita Cookie to this tower here on 240 or near 240?
It could be, yes, sir.
Okay. Let me ask you this: if Cellhawk allows you to pull a line, right, from one point to
Yes, sir.
another point, and if the Cellhawk software actually pulled a line from Makita Cookie to that point and said it was approximately 3 miles, would you have any reason to disagree with that?
I would agree with that. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right. And then this part of airways, excuse me, down here at 1223 from the airport, would you dispute that the Cellhawk software showed it from its mapping capability that this cell tower is about 3.2 miles from Makita Cookie, from there to here?
Yes, sir. I would agree.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, number one, was there any particular reason why you didn't map out either of these 1223, either data usages or calls that occurred, the one out here at I-240 or the one down here at the airport?
No, sir. I did not map those out, sir.
And again, you can see we're not talking about it exact science here, but within a minute, this cell phone, one that is associated with Mr. Johnson, is hitting off, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 towers
Yes, sir.
that are miles away from one another.
Yes, sir.
And within this period of time, you would agree with me, and again, these mileages are as the crow flies, as they say.
Correct. Yes,
Right,
sir.
or as the tower
Sight.
see it.
Yes, sir.
No one's, in less than 30 seconds, no one's getting from up here around Dietrich Avenue down to the airport,
Correct. Yes, sir.
right? They're not driving that far going there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you mentioned an address in your report, and I'm not going to say the first numbers. It's on that exhibit in front of you. It's up here, right under Orange Mountain, and it's Pfizer Road. You remember that address as being one associated with?
That was in the subscriber records.
That's right. And I don't have your page number in front of me, but you would agree that that's the subscriber information associated with the phone for Mr. Johnson.
2667 Pfizer Road.
Yeah. You don't have to say the number. I'm just saying
Yes, sir. That's correct.
so that was the phone associated with Mr. Johnson.
Yes, sir.
And as far as the subscriber information, and it's right up here, not very far from what we've got marked down here is Bradley Avenue, or their address of Hernandez Gomez.
Yes, sir.
Right there in that same area.
Yes, sir.
So you talked about cell phones hitting the nearest available tower.
Yes, sir.
Right. A lot of things can affect availability, right?
Yes, sir.
Congestion, like too many people,
Yes, sir.
on a particular cell tower, and you said it could even shift mid call for people. there's too many people on it, right?
Yes, sir.
Like you can be on a call, and if it gets overly congested, it may direct you to a different tower.
If the device is stationary, I don't see that it would hand off.
Okay.
If the device is moving, I could see that it would hand off.
So what happens if you're on? Because I understood your testimony earlier to be, look, if you're on a tower and it gets too many people on it, it may transition you to a different tower.
You're already on that tower, so it wouldn't let you go. It would not let new traffic on.
Okay. All right. If you're in some of these areas, and like we could see, that can go out maybe as much as 3 miles, right?
Yes, sir.
So even when you're saying someone's using and servicing a tower in the area of Makita Cookie at a particular time, that could give or take 3 miles in different directions, obviously.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And the same goes for any of the locations, whether it's Valero gas station
Yes.
or crosstown concourse.
Yes, sir.
You talked a little bit about coverage area, and there was one question that Mr. Hagerman asked you about, and about whether this tower would cover this area, and you said, I can't answer that. I didn't do a drive test.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is a drive test?
A drive test is where the Memphis Police Department doesn't have the equipment, so we have to borrow the equipment from the FBI is what we use. That equipment has antennas that measure the frequencies in the broadcast of the antennas of the towers within a geographical area that is predetermined. And then it takes those signals and those measurements and plots out a map to see during that drive time how that antenna broadcasts and can receive. And I put in a drive test result from an earlier case from years ago that showed the distance of, and I guess kind of lines of how the tower was broadcasting and receiving.
Okay. And did you do a drive test as to the areas of the tower surrounding Makita Cookie
No, sir.
or Valero gas station?
No.
Or crosstown concourse?
No, sir.
No. So when it comes to kind of the opinions you've given about whether or not a person was in the area, or excuse me, a cell phone was in the area of a particular tower that was serviced by a particular tower, you can't really know where in the area that person would have been.
That's correct.
And they could have been in a different area, right?
Yes, sir.
And because of congestion on the towers or other reasons, service that tower instead.
It was just the device accessed that tower. That's all I can say, sir.
And another thing that affects what tower availability is sometimes towers go down.
Yes, sir.
Right. And just to be clear, you wouldn't have that information when you get your cell tower database. Like you wouldn't know that from the provider that one went down for maintenance.
No, sir. Would not.
Or if it was damaged in some, for a period of time during that, which caused it not to be working properly.
Correct. We would not know that. No, sir.
Okay. And obviously that would, again, affect what you talked about with coverage area.
Yes, sir.
You're right.
Yes, sir.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Can you redirect?
Super quick. You testified with regard to the call detail records and the location, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Were physical extractions done from some of these cell phones?
They were.
And is it Jesse Browning that would have analyzed those physical extractions?
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
Mr. Evans?
Nothing further.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Let's call your next witness.
Mr. Evans is getting my attention real quick.
Okay.
I'm going to read a stipulation of the evidence, and I can ask the court to honor signature first. And to enter into evidence.
Why don't you read it first, and we'll mark it.
Yes. Now, this is stipulation of fact, the state of Tennessee versus Justin Johnson is on trial. Trial indictments 22-04-679, stipulation of fact. The parties in this matter, the state of Tennessee, represented by Paul Hagerman and Iris Williams, and the defendant Justin Johnson, represented by Luke Evans, have agreed to the following. For the purposes of count 3 of indictment 22-04-679, that's the trial indictment, the defendant Justin Johnson is a convicted felon, having been previously convicted on May the 2nd of 2017 in Division 8 of the Criminal Court of Shelby County under docket number W1700355 of a qualifying felony for purposes of Tennessee Code annotated 3917-1307B1A. This is a fact that is agreed to by all the parties. It should be accepted by the jury as true. It is stipulated and approved by the court. I've signed it, Mr. Evans signed it, the defendant Justin Johnson signed it, and Judge Mitchell has also signed it. We would move this into evidence this Sunday.
I'll mark this exhibit number 66.
And we're ready for the next witness, except for three things at the request of counsel that we've spoken about just now that we need to do. So if you could indulge us in about a 7-8 minute break, we'll be back.
Y'all heard him say 7 or 8 minutes, right? We're gonna hold them to it.
All right, jury's excused.
morning, Dre.
Jury's not here into the courtroom, John.
State, can we call your next witness?
Jesse Browning.
Stand right here, sir. Raise your right hand facing Young.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Have a seat.
Will you state your name for the court and spell it for the record?
Jesse Browning. It's going to be Jesse Browning.
And just keep your voice up so I can hear you out here. Don't worry too much about that microphone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, just ignore it. Just keep your voice up so we can hear you.
All right.
Where do you work at?
I work for the Memphis Police Department,
For how long?
15 years.
And what is your current assignment there?
Multi-agency gang.
Investigator?
Yes.
How long have you been with the multi-agency gang unit?
Since 2015, so 9, 10 years.
In that capacity, have you engaged and been primarily responsible for quite a few sort of long-term, larger-scale investigations?
I have.
Did you become involved in the investigation surrounding the murder of Dolph?
I did.
I think what I'll do is ask you a few substantive questions about that investigation at the end, but first let's hear about your special qualifications and experience with cell phone analysis, cell phone extractions.
All right. So about the last 9, 10 years, I've been analyzing cell phone images and extractions and dealing in call detail records, which is what you just saw. I'm not an expert like he is, but I have been trained and certified in Cellbrite, XRY, PenLink, which is one of the softwares used to kind of produce those mappings that you see in the records. And I use them on a day-to-day basis for about the last 10 years.
Have you done that in the course of numerous investigations?
Numerous, yeah.
Have you looked at, and let's back up, when you said you're not an expert like him, you're talking about Mr. Gardner?
Oh, yeah.
Whose expertise the jury heard was on cell phone location testimony.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you have expertise in those cell phone extractions and analysis of those extractions?
I have been certified. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the extraction end. On the analysis, I do a lot of analysis. Garner does phones every single day. That's what his primary job is. I'm an investigator. I utilize those tools to find evidence. Garner can dive into those phones and actually get the evidence that I need.
You have reviewed hundreds of cell phone extractions, is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Looking for evidence?
Yes.
In other investigations?
Other investigations.
And numerous cell phones in this investigation?
Numerous cell phones in this investigation.
And how many years you say you've been doing that sort of stuff?
10 years.
And are you, tell me if I'm using the right word, when I look at a cell phone extraction, it's some program called Cellbrite?
Cellbrite is one of them, yes.
Okay. Is that one of the programs you use to look at the extractions?
Yes.
And is there more programs that you use too?
Yes, there are more programs.
All right. And are you familiar with navigating all those programs and been trained on those programs?
Yes.
Have you testified with regard to the results and your analysis of cell phone extractions in the counties, in Shelby County before?
Yes.
In courts?
In court.
One time or several times?
Maybe 1 or 2 times, not many.
In this case, I'm talking about the murder of Dolph.
Yes.
Did you have occasion to analyze several cell phones.
I did.
In particular, did you have occasion to analyze cell phone extraction from the defendant Justin Johnson's phone?
I did.
In the course of doing that, did you also analyze cell phone extractions from other phones as well, like Cornelius Smith's phone,
Cornelius Smith's phone,
like
Angela Arnold,
like Angela Arnold's phone, like Treon Ingram's phone,
Trion Ingram.
and other individuals? In preparation for your testimony today, you and I spoke, is that correct?
We did.
And I asked you to look at certain things, is that correct?
That's correct.
Certain things regarding Mr. Johnson's phone? And did you do that?
I did.
And in fact, did you prepare a report outlining some of those things?
I did.
Let me pass you this. I should recognize it.
I did. This is my report.
Okay. And for the record, we look at it, physical phone analysis, Justin Johnson, cellular device 236-1625. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's the first page.
That is the first page.
And in that report, before we go through it, in that report, does it isolate particular text messages, for instance?
It does.
Particular communications?
Yeah.
Maybe an image or two,
Yeah.
and other things in the case.
Correct.
Now, we'd offer that evidence to say sex numbers. So
No objection.
This is a several page document. No, I think.
I do not know the exact amount.
Several page document, it's under the back. Physical phone analysis, Justin Johnson, cellular device information. With the MSISPN number of 901-236-1625. We'll mark this as as collected exhibit 67.
my count may be bad, but I think it's 25 pages for the record. Right, if we could publish this to the jury, I'm going to ask you some questions as we go, Detective, okay?
All right.
And we'll start just that front page. What's this information over to the left here?
So this is just an overview and an extraction report. And so as you see, I highlight, usually what I'll do is just highlight things. Obviously, I'm going to highlight the telephone number, but if there's anything that kind of identifies the user that sticks out, because you can get aliases and things like that, if it appears to be their full name, I'll just highlight. So essentially, I highlighted Justin T. Johnson 123@gmail.com.
Okay, that's the Apple ID Gmail account. With regard to the phone. We can go back. That's the Apple ID or Gmail account for the phone.
Correct.
Okay. And target number 236-1625.
Correct.
I asked you to look at certain text messages within a certain time frame. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If we flip the page to the next, do you see one of those?
We do.
All right, tell me what we got here.
So right here we have on November 16th, 2021, at 6:10:31 p.m., we have Treon Ingram sending a outgoing text, which is a photo of what appears to be like a white Mercedes-Benz. And then this was actually pulled from Treon Ingram's cellular device. So this was a text message on his device.
Day before the murder?
Day before the murder.
Outgoing from Treon Ingram?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Incoming to Justin Johnson's phone.
Correct.
And you pull it in Cell Bright River program you're looking at, this is what it sort of comes up as, is that correct?
Correct. It looks like it would your regular phone, but on the side, as you can see below it, that will have just the information associated with that text message.
And here's the blown up photo, is that correct?
Correct.
And that is at 6:10 PM, day before the murder.
Day before the murder.
All right, next.
This will be November 17th, 2021, the day of the murder at 2:58 AM. And it's a outgoing text message to Treon Ingram. And it's gonna be a location drop. And then the location that was dropped is gonna be 1168 Bradley Street, Memphis, Tennessee, 38114.
From Justin Johnson's phone to Treon Ingram, 2:58 AM, the morning of the murder.
Correct.
Do you know this address, 1168 Bradley Street?
Yes, it's to the left of 1174 Bradley. So if you're, I think it's, if you're facing it. Yeah. So I think it's like that, it would be, if you're facing 1174, it's gonna be right there to the left.
And what's the significance of Bradley Street and or those addresses?
So 1174 is the actual driveway, but where the white Mercedes-Benz was found. But I think it's kind of that driveway sits in between both houses.
Understood. And you say drop the location. That is Johnson sending a location to Treon Ingram at 2:58, and it's at Bradley location.
Yeah, so the location drop, it's actually, when you look at it from the map, it's kind of, it looks like he just dropped his location.
Okay, like this is where I am.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Next slide. This is not pulled from the phone, is that correct?
That's correct.
Just to put the slide we just saw in context.
Correct.
3:16 AM. For the record, this is a video that has already been played at trial as part of Exhibit 5. Where is this at?
This is going to be the Valero gas station at 853 South Highland.
And what is the significance of the two cars highlighted?
There's going to be the white Mercedes-Benz and the Q40, or I think it was an Infiniti. And essentially, I was using it to match up for the location drop. So we're trying to figure out with call detail, with this, I think the call logs you were able to track to see where they went after that.
Bradley location drop, and
Correct.
some 18, 20 minutes later, you have the white Mercedes and the Infiniti at the Valero gas station.
That's correct.
And the individual who enters the store here, who is that?
That's Treon Ingram.
You can proceed to the next slide.
And then this is going to be a zoomed in still shot of the surveillance video. We were just trying to see if we could get a better view of where we were told they were met, where they met, just near some air pumps or something on the back end, and that was at 3:22:19 AM. And that was about as good as we could get it as far as zooming into the photo.
And is this the individual that gets in the Mercedes and drives away?
That's correct. They kind of do like a switch, like one gets out, the other gets in. It was just very hard to tell distinctively who that individual was.
Absolutely. Would you agree with me? It's impossible to tell from even the zoom in who that individual is just from the picture.
No, maybe that they have gray pants on. That's about it.
Next slide. 10:51 AM. Tell me what we're looking at.
That's correct. 10:51 to 10:55. And this is going to be on November 17th at 10:51 AM. And this is a still shot photo of Justin Johnson wearing a blue hoodie, gray sweatpants, and black shoes with white stripes and the Bass Pro Shop hat. And it looks like it's going to be his daughter just standing. You can barely see her to the left. And then
Were you aware through the investigation that he was living there across town?
correct, yes. And then the The second photo, of course, is the white Mercedes Benz.
And that is leaving the garage at 10:55, so about, well, pretty much 10:56, 56 seconds, so 10:56 a.m., is that correct?
Correct.
$10:54 a.m., so this actually be in that time period that we just saw, is that correct?
In between that time. Justin Johnson, we found he places an outgoing call to Cornelius Smith with a 0 duration. So essentially, it was a missed call. So he tried to contact him. There was no communication, no voicemail picked up.
Next slide.
At 11:56:57 a.m., we have an outgoing call to Treon Ingram from Justin Johnson, and that call was about 4 minutes. A little over 4 minutes long. And then we have it on November 17th at 12:04:32 p.m. We have an outgoing call from Justin Johnson to Cornelius Smith, and that duration is about 17 seconds.
And we are within 20 minutes, 21 minutes of the homicide, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that call you said has duration?
Yeah, 17 seconds. And then-
12:23, is that correct?
Correct. So on November 17, 2021 at 12:23:06 p.m., Justin Johnson receives an incoming call from his mother, and that duration is 0. And that time frame was significant for me and the investigators because that was at the same time frame that the homicide was being committed.
And no durations, I think as you said before, nobody picks up, no voicemail, just No connection.
And they actually had an abnormal completion code, which indicates like, if you look at the service codes, that it had some kind of network interruption that can mean nothing significant, but essentially he never picked up or the call might have not gone through.
12:25 p.m., directly murder time frame or after, is that correct?
Correct. 12:25:40, Justin Johnson places an outgoing call to Anthony Mims, and it's got a 2-second duration, which appears probably to go unanswered.
This is right after the homicide.
Correct.
Who's Anthony Mims?
It's Big Jug, this is like the number 2 on CMG record label.
And how's Big Jook identified in Justin Johnson's phone
Under Jug.
as Jook?
Okay, so here is 12:26:50 p.m. on November 17, 2021, and it's a FaceTime audio so this is an actual identity lookup service. So what this was, essentially this was pulled from the file system. And so this isn't the actual FaceTime communication. And this, because those were deleted. And so they were missing from the call log. You can see though in the file system, the actual phone will access certain things. And so the only thing that was remaining, because you can delete and move things. You can operate and manipulate your physical phone, but you can't get rid of anything on the file system. It determines when it's appropriate to get rid of it. And so the only thing we found was that there was some type of application with the FaceTime audio that was accessed by FaceTime, and then it identified telephone number 901-692-2767, which we were able to identify to be Anthony Mims' telephone number.
So this is about a minute after the call that we just saw.
That's correct.
FaceTime audio, or FaceTime rather. FaceTime, Justin Johnson to Big Joe.
Correct. well, an interaction, we're not necessarily sure which
Okay.
direction, just that the interaction occurred. right?
FaceTime interaction between Justin Johnson's phone
Correct,
and Big Joe's phone.
correct.
Okay.
It occurred, or something that the phone accessed.
Very good.
And then right here is November 17th, 2021, you have at 12:39, so at 12:39:07, Justin Johnson places an outgoing call to Kiana Hooper. And then at 12:39:56, Justin Johnson receives an incoming text from Kiana Hooper. And then at 12:53 p.m., Justin Johnson places an outgoing call to Kiana Hooper. And the first call, which was at 12:39:07, lasted about 15 seconds. And then the last call, which is at 12:53 p.m., the duration was about 28 seconds.
And do you know who Kiana Hooper is?
His cousin, and that's the apartment he went to after the homicide.
Next slide.
The next slide is the actual, so the text message, that was just the record showing the text message. This is the actual text message that Justin Johnson received, which is 12:39:57 p.m. And it's her address, which is 4752 Haven Court.
Is that the Gospel Garden Apartments?
That's correct.
Used to be called the Two Lanes.
That's correct.
Next slide.
And after that, you have at 12:47:22 p.m., Justin Johnson sends that address, 4752, to Jermaine Sears.
How did you establish that number was Jermaine Sears?
We use law enforcement databases. There was also some information within the text message that helped to identify him just by his real name and things of that nature. And then also we ended up contacting him to try to talk to him
On that number?
on that number. And we were referred to his attorney, and he's actually it appeared to be living out of town, so we kind of let it be.
Next slide.
The next slide is going to be at 12:40:30, so this text is essentially immediately after. He says, "Now, bro, I need you now." And that's an outgoing text from Justin Johnson to Jermaine Sears.
Next slide.
And then at 12:47:51, you have Jermaine Sears sending an incoming text to Justin Johnson saying that he's on his way, I'm on my way.
Next slide.
And then this is an outgoing call at 12:58:59, and this is going to be from Justin Johnson to Kiana Hooper. It lasts it's a duration of about 12 seconds.
What's this here?
So this is Jermaine Sears. This was unique as this was inside. It was a photo that Justin Johnson had from a text between Jermaine Sears, and that vehicle was important to us because that's the vehicle that shows up at Haven Court on surveillance.
A nice Dodge Charger with that light black stripe and
That's correct. All right. So still November 17th, 2021. You have at 1:26:29, you have Cornelius Smith places an outgoing call to his girlfriend, Angela Arnold.
let me back you up there. Whose phone is Cornelius using?
So he is utilizing Justin Johnson's phone.
So would it be more understand that you're privy to information, obviously that came in the investigation,
Correct.
but would it be more accurate to say Justin Johnson's phone contacted Angela Arnold's phone at 1:26, 1:28, 1:28 that afternoon?
Yes, it would. With one text message, so 2 outgoing calls and 1 outgoing text message.
And who is Angela Arnold?
This is gonna be Cornelius Smith School.
Okay.
And then we have that outgoing text, which is, this came from Angela Arnold's actual physical phone, so at 12850, that text, it's the Haven Court address.
Is this again, to be hyper technical and accurate here, Justin Johnson's phone, text Angela Arnold, 4752 Haven Court?
That's correct. So it's an incoming text message from 901-236-1625.
Next slide.
Next slide is just, it shows a call log, so you have a outgoing call from the 901-236-1625, so Justin Johnson's cellular phone number, to Angela Arnold's cellular telephone number.
Okay.
And then you have, I've got on here as well, because we had her call detail records, just showing that incoming call coming from Justin Johnson's cellular device. And then at 2:07:15 p.m., you have, so this is going to be Angela Arnold's cellular device is now sending an outgoing text to Justin Johnson's cellular device. And it's going to be, "This is C, bruh, send me, bruh, numbers so I can get my phone."
And who is C?
C is going to be Cornelius. They call him Little C.
And this was, I don't even know that we need to review these last two slides, but you also printed out the cellular device information for Treon Ingram's phone and for Angela Arnold's phone. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. On those reports.
Now, you mentioned something about Justin Johnson's messages, call logs. Did you say they've been deleted?
That's correct. So they were not there. You look at call detail records, you can't delete those. And so we were able to see he was utilizing his phone, he was communicating with people. I think as you saw his mother calling and things like that, and those communications were not in the actual phone, physical phone.
These are just sort of a mix of questions here that need your answer to. I think I've moved on from the phones. With regard to Mr. Johnson, a couple questions. Did you know he was a rapper?
Yes.
Did you review rap videos that he made?
I did.
Did you find some of those videos on his phone?
I did.
Did you observe in those rap videos that he has tattoos on his hands?
I did.
Have you yourself observed that he has tattoos on his hands?
Yeah.
Did you observe in those rap videos that he's left-handed or right-handed?
He's right.
Did you I'll strike that. Did there come a point in this investigation while you're the case officer on it in which law enforcement wanted to find Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Did they go to Mr. Johnson's house?
Yes,
Did they go to other locations in Memphis looking for Mr. Johnson?
they did.
Was he found in Memphis?
He was not.
Was information received that he was outside of Memphis?
There was.
Was information received that he had traveled back and forth sometimes from outside of Memphis to Memphis?
That's correct.
Would you describe the attempts to find Mr. Johnson as a manhunt?
Yes, you can say that.
Multiple agencies,
Multiple agencies,
including the U.S. Marshals?
including the U.S.
As part of looking for Mr. Johnson, was his social media monitored? by law enforcement in those days that y'all are looking for him? Is he ultimately taken into custody?
He is.
And do you remember what state he was taken into
I
custody?
think it was Indiana.
Indianapolis. Were the murder weapons in this case ever recovered?
They were not.
You're familiar that the car on Bradley was recovered, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's the address you mentioned before with the location drop from Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, 1168 is next to 1174. It's kind of found in between there, the back of 1174.
Earlier in this trial, there was a case officer on this case before you, is that correct?
That's correct.
Terrence Dabney, who retired?
Yes.
Earlier in this trial, Mr. Dabney was asked about testing that was done on the car on Bradley.
That's correct.
Was there information that the car had been cleaned and wiped down?
Yes.
Nevertheless, was crime being performed on the car?
It was.
Would it be fair to say that there were fingerprints found in the car?
There were.
Cornelia Smith, Kirsten Gardner, Triana, is that correct? Was there information or evidence that the perpetrators of the Dolph murder were wearing gloves?
Other than syringes, but yes.
They all surveillance
Yeah.
video, right? We
Yeah,
saw it.
Thought you meant with DNA testing or something on the car.
Fingerprints found on the car, even though it had been cleaned.
Correct.
We know the people that got in the car at the time of the homicide are getting out of the car and in the car wearing gloves. Other testing that was done on the car, was there like chapstick found in the car?
Yes.
Testing on chapstick was performed, is that correct?
That's correct.
And some of these results, would they have come in after Mr. Dabney retired?
Yes, that's completely possible. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Were you aware that on the chapstick that was found in the car, Treon Ingram's DNA is found on the chapstick?
Yes. It is.
Were you aware that during the investigation, they tried to search the Mercedes to find what may or may not be blood?
That's correct.
Were you aware that they took samples of that stuff?
Yes.
Were you aware they also took what could be called touch DNA samples?
Yes.
And were you aware that that stuff was sent to TBI
Yes, it was.
with inconclusive results, either DNA obtained but not enough to make any sort of comparison, or just simply inconclusive results?
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you know where Pressure World is?
Yes.
Where's that?
Right up there up Lamar.
It's right by Lamar, in the Lamar Sims area. Is that location bear any sort of significance in this case?
It does. That's where it was supposedly Cornelius Smith met with Hernandez Govan to get his actual phone that he left in the car after the homicide.
And that, as you said, that's in the area of Lamar Sims. Is that correct? You aware that Mr. Govan's charged in this case?
I am.
Mr. Smith's charged in this case?
He is.
Mr. Johnson's charged in this case?
That's correct.
Can you tell us why Big Jook is not charged in this case?
He is deceased.
That's all my questions, Judge.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So Detective Browning, my name's Luke Evans. I think we've spoken before.
Yeah.
All right, so I've got a few more questions for you today. Just to follow up on some of the things you've testified to. So if I understand it, you took over for Sergeant Dabney as the lead case agent or lead detective on this case.
I wouldn't say lead, it was more like we're a support team at MGU, but I was one of several lead, investigators on that team. Dabney and others still had control of that until it turned into more of a conspiracy thing. And as a unit, we kind of pushed it forward.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure they appreciate you not trying to take all the credit.
It's a lot of work for one man, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, couple of things. Were you working the case at all November 17th when the homicide first occurred?
No, I was not.
Okay. How far down the road is it when you get involved?
Sometime around in the beginning of December, somewhere in mid-December.
Of 21?
Yeah.
Okay, so early on.
Oh yeah, early on, it was just, wasn't in November, I think it was in training when it happened, and then when we came back, some of my team was already, they were on the scene and were assisting as it started to grow. You need assets and manpower and things of that nature. That's when we started getting more involved.
Okay. So, couple of things about the phone and the exhibit that was put in where you did a PowerPoint essentially going through some of those phone records. And you talked about this some with Mr. Hagerman when there was calls that said Cornelius Smith calls Angela Arnold, and it was from Mr. Johnson's phone, right?
Correct.
So, and he made a point to say, like, look, just to be very accurate,
Right,
all you can really say is Justin Johnson's phone contacted that person.
correct.
There's several other places in your report where you reference that Justin Johnson called individuals, right? But you can't say that Mr. Johnson necessarily placed those calls, correct?
No, just that his cellular device placed those calls, unless you take maybe the one on the elevator, clearly he was on the phone.
That one. For instance, you made a reference to a call to Big Joke or Anthony Mims and a FaceTime attempt.
Yeah,
That you interaction, I think is what you
Correct.
called it.
Correct.
You can't say who initiated that call or that FaceTime interaction, correct? Only that it was something that occurred on that phone.
Yeah, I was basing it off testimony that was given to me by other, cooperating defendants and witnesses and things of that nature.
Okay. But based on the phone records, not getting into what other
Yeah,
people
the
with on
record
this point,
itself, just an interaction between his device and Anthony Mims' device.
because you would agree with me when you start relying on other cooperating defendants, you're relying on them to be truthful, right? About their interactions.
Always.
Right. And they're not always truthful about their interactions. Okay?
That's correct. That's why we like the phone.
And so and in this case, there's multiple instances where somebody's claiming to be using someone else's phone, right? Like,
Oh, okay,
yeah, like the reason you say Cornelius Smith called Angela Arnold, right?
correct, yeah.
Right.
He didn't have his phone.
Mr. Jamarcus Johnson, having Mr. Johnson's phone for a period of time, according to his testimony, and utilizing that phone, right? And Mr. Johnson wasn't the one, according to Mr. Jamarcus.
I think he stated more when we interviewed him that he was utilizing it on the behalf of just like for Justin
Sure.
doing three-way calls. So I
Sure,
don't know if
but-
that counts.
But he's got the phone, right? Not Mr. Johnson. At that point, he's got the phone, right? Not Mr. Johnson. Personally. So there's other people taking other people's phones for whatever reason, at least on one occasion, not even being in the same location as that person, right? But when you're purely looking at call data, all you can say is this phone did this action,
Correct.
right?
This phone made that contact in this phone, yeah.
And talking about, and I'm not asking you what someone said, but we talked about cooperating defendants in this case, one of which you met with was Hernandez Gomez.
Correct.
On at least 2 occasions, correct?
Correct.
And he came in and gave you information about this case?
That's correct.
And he also did that, he had an attorney present, right?
Yes.
And he did that pursuant to an agreement, right, where he had protections, something called a proffer agreement, where he got to come in and say what he wanted to say without his words being used against him. Isn't that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Wrong.
Right? And you understand that to mean that some people call that kind of a queen for a day agreement. He's allowed to come in,
Tell the truth.
hopefully, right?
Well, that's on him because then he loses the proper agreement.
Right. Right, and that's the risk, right? People come in and lie,
That's his risk then.
right?
Right.
But the assumption is he tells the truth under a proffer agreement, and what he's telling law enforcement in that meeting, those words, they can't come in and use those words against him, right? It's a form of something called use immunity, right? But they can't use those words. Now, kind of moving forward from some of the phone information, when you're looking at this case, obviously you're looking at the video, right? And it shows the video at Makita Cookie, right? And it shows a Bass Pro Shop, what looks like a Bass Pro Shop hat, right?
That's correct.
And you see a similar hat at Concourse Crosstown video, correct?
Yeah, identical hat. I would say.
Well, you say identical, but let me ask you, did you recover the hat?
No.
All right. Very popular hat.
It's distinct.
Distinctive, no doubt, right? I mean, that's Pro Shop, but a very popular hat. I mean, almost a stone's throw from here is one of the biggest Bass Pro Shop in the
I'd say
world.
It's a lot more popular now.
Well,
That was not a common thing at that time, I think, to see rappers wearing the Bass Pro Shop that I saw. And that's what I do. For a living, we deal with all types of situations where you're keeping up with the videos and what these guys are doing.
so you're aware that a rapper named Travis Scott has his own signature Bass Pro Shop hat, right?
No, I did not.
Okay. So, and people like Gwen Stefani have gone on Instagram and posted themselves in a Bass Pro Shop hat,
No, I didn't know that.
right? And so, kind of a trend, a popular trend, right? Those people are posting it. I mean, Gwen Stefani doesn't live in Memphis that I know of.
Yeah, I mean, if you say it is,
Right.
I just have not seen it when it came. That just wasn't a common hat that I observed in our investigations and just things,
Right.
I
Well, and
saw
even,
Gwen Stefani,
so,
you know what I mean?
well, some people like the voice these days, right?
I'm not hating on it.
And so, and during your investigation, you interviewed at least one individual from the Makita Cookie that identified a person and said he always wears a Bass Pro Shop hat.
I didn't interview. I don't know what interview you're talking
Well, do you remember, would you have reviewed the other interviews in this case? Were you?
Yeah, there was a lot of interviews, but I don't remember somebody being identified. I could be wrong, but I just don't recall that ever happening.
So I'm going to ask you something to refresh your recollection.
Okay.
And there's a highlighted portion there in the middle. What looks like an interview that was done by Detective, I think, or then Sergeant Dabney. Do you see what I'm referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was at least one person interviewed, and I'm not going to state this fellow's name because I don't know.
Burglarizing Walmarts with a Bass Pro hat.
Something, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, but there's a
I
guy out
didn't even see
there.
a reference to a murder or anything about that. But
Well, I mean, some guy running around in a Bass Pro Shop hat, right? So popular hat, whether,
somebody,
say again?
according to somebody, I guess. I don't
Sure.
remember interviewing that person or even seeing that interview.
But I mean, no doubt you looked at it. The interview happened. There's a report here of it from Detective Dabney, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the white Mercedes, did it have any bullet holes in it?
I think it did in the rear. Pretty sure.
What about inside? Were there any indications of a bullet hole or?
There might have been. I can't recall. I think the window might have been busted out.
Okay.
It's been 3 or 4 years. I haven't reviewed everything.
Now, I'll ask you this question about cameras. You're aware that as soon as Bradley Street became a place of interest, where cars found on Bradley, that detectives went out and canvassed that area to talk to neighbors and everyone else.
Correct.
To see if they had any information.
Correct.
Right? Also to see if they had cameras.
Correct.
As you sit here today, has there ever been camera footage produced from anywhere on Bradley?
No, I know they knocked on all the doors, but I didn't see anywhere where they were able to recover any actual video
Okay.
from the Bradley Street.
And do you have any direct knowledge of someone knocking on Hernandez Govan's door?
I mean, I can only assume because you can see there's a supplement where they're going and knocking on every door, but some of those supplements aren't that detailed as far as what actually interacted. It looked like either they didn't answer the door or they didn't hear or see anything was the common answer they were getting. And so it would have been pretty significant to get some type of video from Bradley Street.
At any point in your investigation, as you sit here today, have you ever been made aware of any camera footage possessed by Hernandez Govan? And that would be important, right? If he had cameras facing that abandoned house on Bradley Street, correct?
Oh,
And something that if law enforcement found out or knew he had cameras, you would have acted on to try to get that footage if it existed. And you don't have anything like that. One moment, Judge. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
call you next week.
Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we will start.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at a point where we've got to take a little breaks to take care of some legal matters. Shouldn't be very long. Give us a few minutes. Stay in recess.
What stands at recess?
So, Judge, on behalf of Johnson, I'm going to make a motion for judgment of acquittal as to all counts in the indictment, specifically conspiracy to commit murder first degree, convicted felon in possession of a firearm. As to the elements of each, I would submit that state is felt to put on sufficient evidence to allow any rational trier of fact to find him guilty beyond a reasonable. I've got my, let me get ready. Judge, I'll submit this to the court largely because the courts have the ability to sit through all the evidence thus far and is in a perfect position to obviously rule on this motion without me belaboring the point. but I would specifically hit the issue of the conspiracy. I would argue to the court that based on the proof that we have thus far, there is insufficient proof of any agreement prior to the homicide that would allow the jury to ever, any rational trier of fact, to find him guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Essentially, what we've got is Mr. Smith testifying that the only times that the murders were discussed, according to him, between him, Govan, and Juk, Mr. Johnson was not there. He had one conversation with Mr. Govan and Mr. Mims at Mr. Govan's house, and he testified, I believe, that he had another conversation with Mr. Govan with others present, but Mr. Mims was not present. Neither time was Mr. Justin Johnson present for those conversations. And although we have interactions occurring on the cell phone prior to the incident between Mr. Smith and the cell phone from Mr. Johnson, there's not any evidence before the court that would be sufficient to establish a criminal agreement as it relates to Justin Johnson.
Your Honor has heard both direct and circumstantial proof in this case with regard to various counts. Direct proof from Cornelius Smith. Taking up the issue of the conspiracy first, Mr. Smith stated that he was present for times that Juk and Mr. Govan were soliciting and agreeing and planning the murder of Dolph and the other artists. He testified in court in front of the jury that the plan that day was for he and Johnson to drive to Westwood to this turkey drive and kill one of the PRE artists, whoever that was going to be. As happenstance would have it, they came upon Dolph, and we saw the video for ourselves. I think that's more than sufficient proof of an agreement and an overt act taken by Mr. Johnson in furtherance of the conspiracy. Likewise, for the first-degree murder, Your Honor heard the direct proof of Cornelius Smith, who stated he was there, and Mr. Johnson. He were the two that killed Dolph. I think that alone, accomplice testimony is not even required to be corroborated anymore pursuant to our Supreme Court decision just a few months ago. But there's plenty of corroboration anyway. Circumstantially, we've seen Mr. Johnson at Crosstown in the Mercedes-Benz with the outfit on both before and after the murder at Haven Court. And Your Honor has seen, the jury has seen, in my opinion, overwhelming evidence, but even just taking the evidence in the light most favorable to the state, I believe Your Honor has jury questions with regard to all three of these offenses.
Judge, the only thing I would add about conspiracy is there's clearly some evidence of an agreement between Mr. Govan and Mr. Smith based on his testimony. Where I believe it insufficient is the link between Mr. Smith and to what degree there was any, they said that's what they were doing, but the degree to which there's proof that Mr. Johnson, assuming what he says is true, was even aware of those talks, of that agreement. According to Mr. Smith, he had no prior plan to go do that day. They were, according to him, they were going somewhere else to Westwood, and that Dolph happened upon them. So the issue becomes, there's no proof before the court that there was any advanced knowledge by Mr. Johnson of any $100,000 value.
In the light most favorable to the state, the court has sat for the last couple of days watching the proof as everyone has. And I have seen both direct and circumstantial evidence. The court believes as to all three counts. As to the conspiracy, where the defense says there's insufficient proof of any agreement prior to the murder, the court heard and everybody else heard Mr. Smith speak about the meeting that he was present for at Govan's house between he and Govan and Jook, where they spoke about the murder of Dolph. There was, Mr. Johnson was not present for that. Mr. Smith said that. But there was also Mr. Smith's testimony where he spoke about them being present, them being Mr. Smith and Mr. Johnson being together the day, November 17th, the day of this homicide, where their goal for the day was just to go out and find somebody of the PRG groups, the Young Dolph recording. They happened on Dolph, and we saw the video once they pulled up. I believe the state's made a prima facie case between those arguments and the testimony of Mr. Smith and the videos that we saw Mr. Johnson's actions there. I believe the state has made a prima facie case, and now these are questions for the jury to reconcile.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm going to overrule your motion for judgment of acquittal. All right. So the next question is for you and your client. Do you have any proof?
So, Judge, I'd like to have an opportunity to meet with my client briefly, and then I'll come back up.
That's fine. Let's stand in a brief recess.
Court stands in recess.
Step this way, Mr. Johnson. Stand right here, face your honor, raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Amen.
Yes.
So, Mr. Johnson, you understand that we're at the part of the trial now where you have a right to testify or not testify on your own behalf.
Yes, sir.
And you and I have discussed this at length, have we not?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that you have a right to testify on your own behalf.
Yes, sir.
And no one can take that away from you. You understand that? You also have a right to not testify. And if you don't want to testify, the judge is going to instruct the jury they can't hold that against you. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Have you thought about it extensively?
Yes, sir.
We've had several discussions, have we not?
Yes, sir.
And after considering all of that, what do you wish to do?
Not to.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, how old are you?
26 years old.
How long has Mr. Evans been your attorney?
About 2 years.
About 2 years. And he's gone over with you all those things he just talked about.
Yes, ma'am.
About you testifying,
Yes, ma'am.
the pros, in the back, in the cons, the good and the bad. Y'all talked about all of those things,
Yes, ma'am.
and you understand those things. What's your highest education level?
High school.
You graduated from high
Yes,
school.
ma'am.
You have any questions for him,
Ma'am, what do?
for your attorney, about this process, about you testifying? You may step down. Any other proof?
No, you're right.
Right. Anything else we need to add to the charge? We can come
I
to
was
that time.
wondering,
How about if I print it for you so y'all can see it for yourselves?
there we go,
Yeah.
there we go. It's better than me talking for sure.
Right, let's just print it. And, give me a couple of minutes. Let's stay in recess.
What's the recess?
you a minute to look at this. Mr. Hagerman was just telling me about your prior conversation with him, and he was making a recommendation to the court that makes sense about charging the facilitation because the responsibility is being charged.
That's correct. And we had a conversation.
He's convinced me to take criminal attempt out because it was no death.
Agreed.
I'm gonna take criminal attempt out and I'm going to add facilitation. And then the
I think,
the
yeah,
list
so
of the charges will, the second degree murder will go second.
I haven't looked at everything yet, but what I had scribbled out, Your Honor, is that if we skip to count 2 in the indictment, which is the first degree murder count first, I had scribbled out murder first degree as charged. Murder second degree would come next, since it's an A felony with no parole eligibility. Then it would be facilitation murder first degree. Then it would be facilitation murder second degree. Then it would be, if Your Honor's charging voluntary manslaughter, I didn't state, yes, you are. Voluntary manslaughter. Then it would be facilitation voluntary manslaughter. Actually, it goes voluntary manslaughter, aggravated assault, facilitation voluntary manslaughter.
Right, because the aggravated assault is a higher offense than the facilitation.
And then reckless homicide and negligent homicide, and I don't believe you can facilitate.
No, did I not take,
Did you check those out?
I took criminally negligent out. And I was thinking about taking reckless out. But I was gonna listen to arguments either way.
I would think that those are obviously accidental homicides. I don't think that any proof could possibly support it. Strangely though, I think that after you take those out, that you should put a simple assault in them, because I think that simple assault is a lesser included of aggravated assault, which you charge.
Makes sense.
Murder first, murder second, facilitation of murder first, facilitation of murder second, wrong man, aggravated assault, facilitation to wrong man, facilitation to ag assault. Reckless,
The state is asking you not to charge reckless or negligent.
I agree.
so after the facilitation of ag assault, just simple assault.
I think so, Your Honor.
No facilitation to simple assault?
Yeah, I guess so, because you can facilitate those.
I mean, we're facilitating everything else, so,
Yeah, it is an A misdemeanor, you can
Right.
right,
facilitate.
you can. Y'all look at the rest of that. Please.
So I don't understand. So we said the placement and facilitation of a felony.
Say that again? You don't understand the placement, is that what you said?
Yeah, because we have count 1, which is conspiracy to commit murder first degree. Are there lesser included offenses by offense?
Facilitation to the conspiracy. Oh, but it doesn't say that, does it? think I have it labeled wrong. Let me see. So facilitation to conspiracy is the lesser. It's labeled wrong. It should read facilitation.
It looks like the elements are wrong too, so. Your presence.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know if it's your responsibility. Yeah. criminal responsibility. Y'all want to add sentence there.
It's the same thing.
That's the same thing. Give me something more in this picture. She pulls it up. Also, no, what time we start tomorrow?
9:30.
We're gonna copy this. Yeah, there's camera. Here's the name, here's the news office. Prosecution.